Hey guys, it's Sasha. In the last few minutes, Elon Musk has just filed yet another amendment to his 13D filing with the SEC regarding his Twitter acquisition. Think this might be the 9th version, and this one is mega juicy. Elon Musk has just gone out and threw massive punches like he truly means it. He has said that Twitter deal is gonna be off. He's gonna cancel it unless Twitter start playing ball and start to share data with him. Twitter have refused to share the data, so Elon Musk buying Twitter, that story has just got a whole lot more interesting. So here is what Elon Musk said in the latest amendment to the Schedule 13D filing with the SEC. The fun part starts in Item 4, Purpose of Transaction, and the new section that just got inserted reads, on June 6, 2022, the reporting person, that's Elon, delivered a letter to the issuer, that's Twitter, reiterating his request for certain data and information necessary to facilitate his evaluation of spam and fake accounts on the issuer platform. A very direct and a very specific opening. Next he says, and reserving the rights resulting from the issuer's refusal to provide such data and information, a material breach of the issuer's obligations under its merger agreement with the reporting person. The foregoing description of the reporting person's letter is qualified in its entirety by reference to the full text of the letter, a copy of which is attached hereto as Exhibit O and incorporated herein by reference. So, Elon Musk is really pissed off because Twitter is refusing to provide the data that he has requested. Under the original agreement that they struck, apparently when Elon offered to buy the company, Elon reserved the right to request any additional data that he needed to satisfy himself that the valuation of the company was sound and based on factual evidence, and to check any of Twitter's own assessments and calculations. And there is a letter attached to this filing that makes for absolutely glorious reading. Please pause the video right now, go get your popcorn, crack open a beer, make a cup of tea, whatever it is that you want, because it is well worth it. Okay, June 6, 2022. Dear Ms. Gad, we are in receipt of correspondence sent on Twitter's behalf dated June 1st, 2022, responding to Mr. Musk's request for the data and information described in my letters dated May 25th, 2022 and May 31st, 2022. Mr. Musk does not agree with the characterizations in Twitter's June 1st letter. Just before you get really excited, all of these letters, including Twitter's response from June 1st, are not publicly published by the SEC or anybody else, so we can only guess as to what the contents of those letters were. Twitter has, in fact, refused to provide the information that Mr. Musk has repeatedly requested since May 9th, 2022, to facilitate his evaluation of spam and fake accounts on the company's platform. Twitter's latest offer to simply provide additional details regarding the company's own testing methodologies, whether through written materials or verbal explanations, is tantamount to refusing Mr. Musk's data requests. Twitter's effort to characterize it otherwise is merely an attempt to obfuscate and confuse the issue. Mr. Musk has made it clear that he does not believe the company's lax testing methodologies are adequate, so he must conduct his own analysis. The data he has requested is necessary to do so. So, Elon is not taking any prisoners, and it is very clear. He thinks Twitter is lying about the spam and bot numbers and is now busy covering it up. He has asked, apparently, for specific data that he could then use to make his own assessment of what the proportion of users that are bots or spam bots or whatever, and Twitter have refused to provide that data to him, even though, according to Elon Musk, they are legally obligated to do so. Instead, they want to share some blah blah mumbo jumbo about how they manually look at 100 accounts a quarter out of the tens of millions on Twitter and extrapolate the data from that. That is literally what they've said in prior filings. So Elon thought he would remind them of what it is that they apparently have to do, in an Elon kind of way. As noted, under various terms of the merger agreement, Twitter is required to provide data and information that Mr. Musk requests in connection with the consummation of the transaction. Twitter's obligations to provide Mr. Musk with information is not, as the company's June 1st letter suggests, limited to a very specific purpose, facilitating the closing of the transaction. To the contrary, Mr. Musk is entitled to seek, and Twitter is obligated to provide, information and data for, inter alia, any reasonable business purpose related to the consummation of the transaction, brackets section 6.4. Twitter must also provide reasonable cooperation in connection with Mr. Musk's effort to secure the debt financing necessary to consummate the transaction, including by providing information reasonably requested by Mr. Musk, section 6.11. Now, Mr. Musk's request for user data not only satisfies both criteria, but also meets Twitter's narrowed interpretation of the merger agreement, as this information is necessary to facilitate the closing of the transaction. And on this one, I am no lawyer, so please take it for what it is, just my opinion, but it does sound like the first reason that Musk and his lawyers use is probably a bit of a stretch at best, but the second one sounds pretty valid to me. So Elon is allowed to request data for, I quote, any reasonable business purpose related to the consummation of the transaction. And that is pretty close to how Twitter defined it, and I can actually see Twitter's point here, because validating data for your initial offer and valuation is not really directly related specifically to the consummation of the transaction. It is mildly tangential at best. It might be very relevant and useful, but for that particular purpose, I feel it is not necessary. But the second reason is pretty bang on, because apparently Twitter must also provide reasonable cooperation in connection with Mr. Musk's efforts to secure the debt financing necessary to consummate the transaction. And this bit is key, because this one is very different. Lenders are risking large amounts of money here. Other people putting up money towards the equity want additional assurances as to the basis on which they are providing Elon with billions of dollars. And if they have reasonable grounds to suspect that perhaps the premise on which the money is being lent is false or inaccurate, they may want to get additional clarification to get rid of those concerns. And that is a very direct request that is specifically related to the point being made. It is specifically related to the viability of the financing of the transaction. So from where I'm sitting, it sure sounds pretty fair, and Elon makes that very point immediately after. As Twitter's prospective owner, Mr. Musk is clearly entitled to the requested data to enable him to prepare for transitioning Twitter's business to his ownership and to facilitate the transaction financing. To do both, he must have a complete and accurate understanding of the very core of Twitter's business model, its active user base. In any event, Mr. Musk is not required to explain his rationale for requesting the data, nor submit to the new conditions the company has attempted to impose on his contractual right to the requested data. Now listen up, this is where it gets hot. At this point, Mr. Musk believes Twitter is transparently refusing to comply with its obligations under the merger agreement, which is causing further suspicion that the company is withholding the requested data due to concern for what Mr. Musk's own analysis of that data will uncover. This is the great bit that we were waiting for, right at the end of the letter. And remember, this is a legal document filed with the SEC. This is no joke. Elon is saying that there is now further suspicion that Twitter is withholding data because they are afraid Elon's analysis is going to drill them a new butthole. If Twitter is confident in its publicized spam estimates, Mr. Musk does not understand the company's reluctance to allow Mr. Musk to independently evaluate those estimates. As noted in our previous correspondence, Mr. Musk will of course comply with the restrictions provided under section 6.4, including by ensuring that anyone reviewing the data is bound by a non-disclosure agreement, and Mr. Musk will not retain or otherwise use any competitively sensitive information if the transaction is not consummated. So yeah, there is nothing to hide. Based on Twitter's behavior to date and the company's latest correspondence in particular, Mr. Musk believes the company is actively resisting and thwarting his information rights and the company's corresponding obligations under the merger agreement. This is a clear material breach of Twitter's obligations under the merger agreement, and Mr. Musk reserves all rights resulting therefrom, including his right not to consummate the transaction and his right to terminate the merger agreement. Now that is a pretty hefty threat. If you are not afraid that the data will show something wildly different to what you have claimed, if you are not making things up and completely plucking them out of thin air and lying to the SEC in your filings, and by the way, that is a criminal offense and anyone found guilty of such an offense is very likely to face very serious prison time. Now, if you are not committing fraud by making false statements in your regular SEC filings for many years in a row, and you are about to cash in on a very lucrative transaction offer because Elon is offering an extremely nice premium on your share price, especially given what's happened in the stock market this year and what's happened to all the other stocks that are similar to you in terms of their position in the growth cycle, why would you not share this data? If your analysis is right, if it is accurate, if it is based on data, if it is not a complete load of garbage that you've just made up, surely you would just go ahead and, share the data. Let Elon confirm the accurate numbers that you have to make sure that everyone is aware that they are exactly what you say they are. And then you go and collect your paycheck in double time, go and move somewhere hot and sip a mojito on a remote beach. What genuine reason would you have to obfuscate and refuse to provide data when your company is about to go through this acquisition, you're about to depart, you're about to go and collect a whole load of money, other than maybe, just maybe, probably highly unlikely, but maybe knowing that you are full of shit and you lied. This story just got a whole lot more interesting. I have to go and stock up on a bit more popcorn. See you guys later.